So in this section, we're talking about the three links in the epidemic process. The epidemic process of infectious disease refers to the development and transmission of a disease in a population. So this continuous chain of successive transmission of infection is called an epidemic process. There are three key links in this epidemic process, including the reservoirs or the source of the infection, the transmission routes, and the susceptible populations who are easily or more easily to get infectious disease. So the reservoir can be people, animal, or other objects. The transmission route can be direct contact, can be airborne, can be vehicle-borne, or vector-borne. And there are also some susceptible hosts that can be influenced by different factors that we're going to talk about later. So for the reservoirs, it can be human, animal, and environmental. And for the human, we also have two types of the reservoirs, including those carriers or those acute clinical cases. So those acute clinical cases, they can be in the incubation period that have no symptom, or they can be in the clinical stage when they have already have shown the clinical symptoms, or they can be during the recovery period. They still can be the source of infection. And similar for the carriers, they can be incubatory carriers, unapparent infections, subclinical infections, recovered carriers, or chronic carriers. For the environment and animal reservoirs, they can be also different animals and the environment reservoirs. And the pathogens can be spread or transmitted from the reservoir host. They can be transmitted through the respiratory tract, gastrointestinal tract, genitourinary tract, skin, or they can across the placenta or the blood. Here's some example for the transmission routes. For example, for the direct transmission, here are some examples for the direct contact. For example, the sexual transmitted disease such as AIDS or HIV. The respiratory disease can be spread by the droplets in the air. Contact with soil can also cause tetanus. Indirect route of transmission, for example, they can transmit it through the vectors, including like mosquitoes and the fleas. They also can cause or spread through the vehicles, for example, from the air, the TB virus, or can be transmitted from the food, milk, water, such as those viruses that can cause gastrointestinal disease. And also can transmit it through the blood, for example, the HIV and the hepatitis can also be transmitted through blood. So different routes of the transmission disease, we can categorize the infectious disease by these routes. For example, we can call the airborne disease for those disease that can be transmitted through the air, foodborne disease for those who can be transmitted through the food and etc. So when a population is under the pathogen exposures, they can be infected or not infected, and it actually depends on different factors. So we call this kind of the people susceptible population, and the susceptibility of individuals is affected by, for example, genetic factors, and their general resistance factors, for example, their skin, or their gastric acid, and also the specific acquired immunity, both including nature immunity or artificial immunity. So nature immunity means they might have already get disease before and they have already get immunity, and artificial immunity most likely indicate the vaccine